Now, an underwater landslide, earthquake or volcanic eruption, any sudden motion on the ocean floor and deadly waves can rise up, and at alarming speeds and heights that cover entire towns. In the last 15 years, close to 250,000 people have died as a result of tsunamis, the deadliest including the 2004 tsunami in the Indian Ocean and the 2011 disaster in Japan, Fukushima. Well, this Monday is World Tsunami Awareness Day, part of a UN bid to make us all more aware of these disasters and how to react to them. To tell us more, we're joined by the spokesperson of the Office of Disaster Risk Reduction at the UN, Mr. Denis McClean. Mr. McClean, thanks for your time. Can I start, I guess, with a question we all want to know ultimately is what can I do if I find myself in an area with a tsunami coming in? I mean, there's only so fast I can run. Are there warning signs? What should people's first move be?
Well, the best early warning sign for a tsunami is an earthquake. And once you find yourself on a beach or near a seashore and you feel an earthquake, you should immediately evacuate to high ground and remain there until the danger has passed. We saw tragically how many people were unaware of this simple measure in the earthquake and tsunami which happened in Indonesia 33 days ago today. And that was quite tragic because even if there had been an adequate warning system in place, it's unlikely that many people would have been able to escape because the tsunami arrived so quickly after the initial earthquake.
Indeed, and you mentioned there that even if we had a warning...
complacency is the main...
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just saying because you mentioned there a warning system, and the warning system, I mean, that's part of the problem already. If it had worked, people have to, you know, move pretty fast. But a warning system had been put in place, but it doesn't seem to have any impact at all.
Well, in the case of Indonesia, I mean, after the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, there was an early warning system put into the Indian Ocean. All the countries around the Indian Ocean now have access to that. In the case of what happened in Indonesia, they've been developing a new prototype which will lead to great improvements in terms of the speed with which warnings are disseminated, but it hasn't been made operational as yet. But in any event, the issue in Indonesia and in many other places is simply lack of awareness and understanding of what to do once you feel an earthquake in a coastal area. And that is simply to have the instinct to flee to higher ground and remain there until the danger has passed. That's the most basic piece of awareness raising that we can do on this day, you know, World Tsunami Awareness Day. We've seen over the last 20 years a dramatic increase in both loss of life and economic losses from tsunamis, particularly in countries which are under-resourced when it comes to disseminating early warnings, and also countries which are ill-equipped to afford the kind of economic losses that we are seeing as a result of these events. And we're seeing a lot more people living in coastal areas exposed to these hazards. So, you know, it is very important that, you know, from a very young age, children are taught about the danger of tsunami risk in these countries.
And I believe when it comes to training people and that awareness, Japan is apparently quite a good student and it's quite a part of their curriculum nearly in all schools. Indonesia, not so much. Any explanation as to the reticence of that? Does it come down to money?
I think, well, in Indonesia, they have a very good focus on disaster risk reduction, but it does come down to resources at the end of the day. But, you know, many schools in Indonesia do conduct, you know, evacuation drills for children. But what happened 3 weeks ago reveals that, you know, not enough has been done to raise awareness among the general population. I mean, Indonesia has been struck by 6 tsunamis in the last 20 years, and each of them resulted in deaths. So, you know, something definitely needs to be done to raise the level of training, education, access to information for the general population, and also, very importantly, for tourists visiting these countries, because in the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, something like 9,000 tourists lost their lives.
Oh yes, we all need to be more aware.
Across 14 countries in the region.
But it's a very common occurrence. I mean, are tsunamis getting bigger? Are they getting more frequent? Or is it just that we are actually starting to become more aware of them? And, you know, again, when we say run to higher ground, does that mean, I mean, if there's been an earthquake, you're not going to go to the top of a building, are you? I mean, where exactly do you run?
Well, you know, in the case of an earthquake, once the initial tremor has passed, you just seek out higher ground wherever possible. I mean, in the case of Thailand in 2004, people who managed to get to the upper floors of hotels on the beaches there were quite safe because the hotels were constructed to earthquake resistant standards, and also, you know, were able to resist the power and strength of the waves which swept through their lower floors. So looking for higher ground, wherever it might be, whether it's a car park, whether it's a hillside, you know, that's the thing to do if you want to have a chance of surviving one of these terrible events. You know, it should be remembered that 9 of the 10 most powerful recorded earthquakes in the last 100 years all resulted in tsunamis, you know. So just because, say, you know, if you look at the 20 years before, from say the 1970s, 1980s, there were very few tsunamis. But I mean, it's very hard to predict the return time of a tsunami or an earthquake. So, you know, the last 20 years, we've seen quite a few of them.
Why is that? Why have we seen an increase in tsunamis?
One, they're very unpredictable.
Pardon.
Well, there's no real explanation for it. I mean, it's a geological phenomenon that's very difficult to forecast, unlike, say, a hurricane or a heat wave or a drought. So you just cannot be sure of the return times. But one thing that these statistics are telling us is that more people are exposed to tsunami risks. More people want to live in coastal areas near the beach, whatever it might be, is driving this move to the seashore. And that's something that we have to take into account, that if you want to live near a beach or you have to work near a beach or in a tourist area, then you must be aware of the tsunami risk. You must be aware of where the evacuation routes are. You must be aware of what the early signs are of once an earthquake happens in an area like that. Because an earthquake can also knock out the communication systems and the energy grid, making it very difficult then to disseminate a proper warning.
Okay, Mr. Denis McClean, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much for giving us your insight and bringing us that awareness to the Tsunami Awareness Day. Mr. Denis McClean there, UN spokesperson from the Office of the Disaster Risk Reduction. Well, that's where we're going to have to take a quick reminder.